My friends, good evening. I saw that fire in Crans, Montana, and it really shocked me. One of the reasons you can understand is that, when I had to study, I chose Switzerland. It's a country where I have childhood memories. Actually, I used to go there since I was a kid to my aunt's place. I know Crans, Montana. I've visited once or twice. When I was a student, it wasn't really an easily accessible place, let's say, but I was able to visit it with some friends. And today I'm quite struck, like many people are, by this fire in that club that took the lives of 47 people, plus many with severe burns. What would I like to tell you today? I'm personally affected by this. It's a country. Although I often criticize Switzerland, France, Belgium, and others, I'm really criticizing their states, governments, and politicians. I have all of that, and I'm not hiding it. I've never had any love for them, and I don't think that's something that's going to change during my lifetime. So that's clear, but on the other hand, I really love this country, these people, and it really upsets me to see what happened. Now, I'd like to share a few things with you. First, it's a club that caught fire. When I was in Switzerland, I was a volunteer firefighter, and actually, in my work as a firefighter, it often happened that we had to go to performance halls. For example, I liked opera, and I attended all the operas you can think of because I was always going to the opera. And then why? Because it's a venue that welcomes the public. And when there's a venue, there's a law, starting from a certain capacity, from a certain number of people. Firefighters must be present whenever the public is there. We don't just call them if there's a problem. No, the firefighters are there even before the public enters. So we were on watch the whole time. And I remember we had discussed it several times. And then it was a very serious and very formal discussion about possible flames on stage. Because sometimes during a scene in a play or something else, you might have a character who comes in with a candle, with a torch, something like that. It's an element of the show that's discussed with the firefighters that's noted. We know exactly what time it's going to happen. We talk a bit about the guy's path, the size of the flame, all that. Why? Because it's never trivial to have flames in a public place. Honestly, from this firefighter experience and after talking with very experienced people in this field, I realized that if you really want to be on the safe side, it's better to ban the devices. Open flames in places that receive the public, and especially anything pyrotechnic. You know that in this specific case, based on the information I've seen, there's a club that's made up of two floors. So there's the ground floor, and then there's a basement. So the basement, a descent, a staircase. And this staircase apparently was the only access, the only place to get in and out. So there, in a place like that, it's always a bit sketchy. I'm telling you, I come from Africa, and when it was about going to, I think we have a lot to learn from the Swiss. In fact, myself, when I wanted to study, I chose Switzerland, not another country. All right, there's a lot to learn, but I think the other way around, there's also a lot to learn. It's a real exchange because as an African, let me tell you something. You don't trust the system, the institution. You're always wondering if they're doing things properly or not. And actually, it's an everyday reflex. But when you're in Switzerland, there's this trust that allows you to let yourself rely on the system. So you tell yourself, well, we're in Crans, Montana. It's still a really posh place, as the British say, a very interesting place. And then there's this club that's been run for a very long time. I mean, if there were going to be a disaster, it would have happened a long time ago. So it's proven. We have this impression that because it's repetitive, it's proven, and because it's institutionalized, we've thought of everything for safety. People are there. It's the night from December 31st to January 1st. It's crowded, as you can imagine. I think it was packed more than it should be, right? Because I imagine that these rooms that are underground must have some kind, even a basic one, of a limit to the number of people they can hold, except that the audience will fill it up anyway. On a party night, of course, every place is more or less crowded. And here the images are quite something. And here I'm actually thinking back to when I was a volunteer firefighter. The images are pretty staggering. It's that we're in the basement, the ceiling is relatively low, the ceiling is probably, you can't really see it at night, but it's probably decorated, where there are likely insulation materials and such. And we have waiters or waitresses wearing motorcycle helmets. Maybe that's the signature of the place or the evening's theme. Bottles of champagne, and on the champagne bottles, what they've put is a pyrotechnic device. It's a kind of Roman candle. It's a kind of thing you light that will shoot out, right? It's made with magnesium at the base, either a powder, don't quote me on this, either magnesium powder, maybe with a little bit of phosphorus, plus a substrate to hold it all together, right? These things are extremely hot and bright with little stars, very pretty, but extremely hot. Magnesium, it doesn't go out. I mean, it's very flammable and it can spread fire to other things. It's a walk with the bottles. And then, actually, of course, the decorations and the ceiling caught fire. Since there's only one way out, there was a big stampede, panic, all that, and then the fire, 47 dead. So it's true that, the families of the victims, as you'd expect, receive psychological support. In those cases, witnesses and sometimes responders like firefighters and cops get involved, but the public does not. Yet it can shock the public too. I lived in Grenoble. There was a book I really liked back then. And in Grenoble, I remember there was a fire in a nightclub a long time ago, decades ago. Well, in Grenoble, some elderly people, they still talk about it now. You talk about the fire, about that thing. That place is a nightclub. Then one day there was a fire, maybe even under circumstances similar to what happened in Switzerland that night. And actually a lot of young people couldn't escape. It seems that the emergency exits were locked because we're always afraid of people sneaking in, leaving, I don't know, leaving without paying or stealing things. Or, there's always sometimes this concern for security that makes us say, well, okay, let's close the emergency exits, right? It's happened globally and caused tragedies everywhere. And actually, when the fire started, people couldn't escape because the main entrance was always crowded. You see people pushing each other and all that, and it's not effective, when people are pushing. Basically, you can even imagine that if there was an orderly exit, people could get out, right? If you organize drills, you notice that a quick orderly exit is much more effective than a stampede. But you can't blame people for pushing each other, can you? When there's panic, the instinct for self-preservation, the fire, all that, people just have one desire, and that's to get out. And if these stories shock us, it's because they're not frequent, they're not common. When you live in places that are sometimes dangerous, with constant danger, I assure you, sometimes you see something bad happening and you don't react. It almost doesn't affect you anymore. Why? Because it's common. The fact that it happens in Switzerland and affects us shows it's rare, and fortunately it's not common. But still, we are quite struck by it. We are still struck by it. There's also the phenomenon of identification. We identify because of what we see. When the Titan submarine crashed at the bottom of the sea near the Titanic in 2023, there wasn't a strong identification with that situation. Right now I'm in Mauritius. And they have a knack for fireworks. I mean, they've set off extreme amounts of pyrotechnic devices. You see, earlier, I asked my daughter to be careful because I was afraid one of those devices would go off because it was much closer than that. Now you can hear them, they're a bit far, but earlier they were extremely close. I even think it was the neighbor who was setting them off. And I was afraid that one of them would go off course and end up in the house. You see, you have to be careful with those things. And actually, I was saying that before I got distracted by that When the Titan crashed, it shocked many people, but we didn't really relate to the victims. It's normal to feel that way since it triggered our claustrophobia. Those feelings are inside us. Maybe it's a remnant of ancient fears from the time of atavism, as they say, back when our ancestors were in caves. And a landslide of falling rock meant that was it was the end. And actually, I was saying that there is no identification. Few people watched that and thought, I could have been there, but really you couldn't have. I mean, it doesn't happen. There aren't many guys in the world who would think of paying $250,000 to go in a tube near the Titanic. And those guys, they did it. But when you have a party like that, it's true that identification is easy already. You go from joy to tragedy, but identification becomes very easy. It means you say to yourself, it could have been me, it could have been someone I know, it could have been someone close to me. Anyone can decide at night, it's 11, I'll go out, walk the city and find a nice spot. I go in, I have a drink, I run into some friends or others, and then I have a good evening. And then at 2 a.m, I go home. You see, a lot of people can have this idea and a lot of people have done it in reality, you see. And so there you see that it can lead to something very serious. Before finishing this video, I mentioned that I, the African speaker, am speaking in an exchange context. So here is the exchange. What I want to tell you is that the very first, if there's a lesson we can learn from this, the first line of security is you. It's not the institution, it's not the organizer, it's not, it happened to me. It might seem ridiculous, but you shouldn't be afraid of looking ridiculous. You just have to. It sometimes happened to me, for example, at a wedding under a tent. They brought out a pyrotechnic device. The guys, they were trying to light it, so I, very politely, without making a scene, I take my phone, I go out, I put it in my pocket, I go outside, I make a call, all that. Then when it's over, I come back. No one noticed, no one knows why I went out, actually. I went out because, well, it's just that I don't trust them. Maybe this tent's been rented for years. Since they have a wedding every night, and each time they do this, except for me, As financial portfolio managers say, past results are not indicative of or do not guarantee future results. You see, when people do things that are dangerous, even if they've been doing them for a long time, and even if things went well before, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything, and you can't trust the institution. Let me give you an example. I'm waiting for him to stop. I'm like Commander Cousteau living in silence. I can read a newspaper from 10 meters away. Just a manner of speaking. But I think my most sensitive sense is hearing. Yes, it bothers everyone, but I think it bothers me the most. I see people with a noise like that around them, and then nobody reacts, even though it would have made me react. In the first 3 seconds, or even up to 30, it's not a big deal. That's just life. Peace returned. I was saying that once. I was on a train à grande vitesse in France. And then there was a suitcase. I sit down, I have a ticket, I sit down, the seats are reserved, the train à grande vitesse starts. I see a suitcase, an old suitcase. It was wrapped in tape, brown, wrapped, but there were miles of it. The guy who wrapped it must have spent a lot. I can totally understand that the suitcase wouldn't close properly and all. We've all had to fix suitcases on the road and all that can happen. Except for the guy, he used so much tape you couldn't see the suitcase, just its shape and all the tape. Me, I was worried. At one point, I got up, I left without panicking, nothing, not even in a hurry. I sit between train cars and take out my book. Later, the conductor comes, looks at the ticket. He says, "Yes, sir, you have a reserved seat. What are you doing here? It's uncomfortable. You can return to your seat." I tell him, "Listen, there's a suitcase that worried me enough that it was a strong enough reason for me to come here." Before I could finish my sentence, he says to me, "The suitcase with tape around it, adhesive tape." I said, "Yes." He told me he understood, saw it, and was worried too. He also thought it was the kind of suitcase you'd only use once. And actually, he told me, "Yes, you're right to stay here." He left. There was no institutional reaction. They didn't stop the train à grande vitesse. They didn't call any bomb squad. Why? Because it's a big company. They deal with hundreds of false alarms every month. Can you imagine their threshold for reacting? It's set at a level they consider a good balance between safety and nuisance. They manage a network and transport millions, but I'm just one person. I'm much more flexible, much more agile. I can set my bar much lower. You see, what I mean is, that's it. I have flexibility with my own bar. So, where the institution sets a bar, well, maybe the owner, the boss, or someone else might object. Every time they saw the pyrotechnics stuff we set off, well, that's just how it is. We do that, we please customers and all, but as a customer myself, would I tolerate that? Because for me, my standards are much lower. All right, don't trust, especially, I almost want to say, especially in Switzerland. You know why? If you visit us in Africa, I guarantee you won't trust. Instinctively, you'll be on alert all the time. That's good. But because it's necessary, all right, because the day you're not on alert, that's it. But in Switzerland, there's this tendency to let your guard down. Unfortunately, there's that tendency. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it. That's why I actually came to say it, just to mention it. That's it, just to talk a little bit about all that. Thank you, my friends, for listening to this video up to this point. May the people who passed away rest in peace in this tragedy. And then please take great care of yourselves. And remember, you are the first line of protection for yourself, your family, your children. It's you who are the first line. It's not the organizers, it's not the institution, it's not the police, it's not the firefighters. That comes after. You are the first line. Always keep that in your mind. See you in the next video.